All right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Hegel. Hegel cannot be understood apart from Kant, that's for sure. You've got to have Kant more or less in your head. Let me give you, for openers, three fundamental themes or emphases that you'll find in Hegel. So we'll start with this. If nothing else, you should have this clearly in your mind. These are, no matter what you read in Hegel, all of his writings, as complex as they are, you find these three themes continue to resurface in a variety of ways. The first of these is the theme of history. For a minute while I make a little reminder to myself. I love this little thing.
What's that mean?
It's just so cool. What's that?
Is that new?
It is new. Well, it's new from Christmas. Now I wonder how I ever got along without it. It's just wonderful. All right, so the first emphasis is history, and that in itself is significant because he's the first really philosopher to tackle the topic of history in a broad sort of way. Augustine has a theory of history. Others have touched on it, but really Hegel in some ways builds his whole philosophy around it. So we keep seeing history show up. And we'll talk more about that a little bit as we go along. We'll just get that right in front of you here. Second emphasis in Hegel is on what I'm going to call revelation, but not revelation as we think of it as Christians. But there is a revelational aspect to the thought of Hegel. He believes that revelation is happening. God is in some sense or other speaking to us, which of course is not what you'd find in Kant, right? There's nothing coming over from the other side in Kant. Third emphasis is his favorite term, dialectic. And those three all kind of combine. They're not separate, but they all more or less have this kind of wonderful dynamic relationship with each other. And taken together, you constantly see these things guiding his philosophy. And what do I mean by dialectic, Krista? What's the basic notion? The meaning of the word dialectic is?
Teaching.
No, that one might be didactic, but you as a student should know that we have the grammar, the dialectic, and the rhetoric. And what is that dialectic? I'll give you another shot at it. What is dialectic? Logic, and there's another feature to it. Trevor?
I probably should define this, but it's more like conversation or argument.
It's argument. Dialectic means debate. It means conflict. And that's at the core of Hegel's philosophy. There is always conflict. The conflict reveals. Revelation happens in the conflict, out of the conflict. And the place where the conflict occurs is in history. So it's historical, dialectical revelation. And no matter what you pick up in Hegel, that's what you're looking at. Now, if I could just give you a little, I hope this little image will stand in your mind. Sometimes pictures get something into your head. And here, what I want you to see is here's Kant and here's Hegel. And here's the 19th century and here's the 20th century. All right? All got this. I want this to be etched in your mind. Kant's influence goes like this. So here we are, here, and Kant's influence is still going, and it's going to continue for some time. We are in a Kantian world. Hegel's influence, on the other hand, dominated more about like this, with some notable exceptions. Hegel overshadowed the 19th century, and Hegel is Kantian in a sense. And so you could say that is part of Kant's influence. But Kant continues to influence in different non-Hegelian ways in the 20th century. But the 19th century is Hegelian to its core. And if you understand Hegel, you really get what's going on in the 19th century. Hegel still kind of reverberates for us, but not nearly in the same way. All right, let me talk a little bit about Hegel versus Kant. So here's our second little chapter. So these are emphases. Okay? Over here we're going to talk about Kant and Hegel's response to Kant. At this point I have 4 little subpoints. Hegel versus Kant. Hegel is Kantian, but at the same time he's revising Kant. He believes he's improving on Kant. He's fixing Kant. Kant created the problem. Hegel thinks he's solving the problem. All right? First thing, Hegel denies Kant's idea of the thing. And Matthew, where do we find in Kant a notion of the thing in itself? Where does that little concept pop up in Kant's philosophy?
The nominal level.
Yes. What does it stand for? Right? Go ahead.
The third one is essence.
That's right. Okay. So what is it? When Kant refers to the thing in itself, the level essences, what in plain English is he talking about there? Okay, well, let's understand this. This is not just jargon, got to be understanding.
Kind of the sense I got from this kind of Platonic idea that kind of the essence of this upstairs level that we can't fully actually explain.
Okay, there's a little bit, you're on the right track. There's a little bit of a Platonic element to it. Are you going to supplement that? Go ahead.
Isn't it just we can't know if anything outside of ourselves exists?
That's exactly it. You all got that? The phrase to plug in to the thing in itself is the external world, the external universe, that which is outside of you. In philosophy, there's traditionally been what's called the subject object. The subject is you in your awareness of yourself. The object is everything else, everything that is not you. You know. Nicole's sitting over there. She's a subject. She looks like she's paying attention to me. But I am still an object. I am not her. And she has many other things going on in her mind right now, probably, besides me, you know, who knows. But there's the subject, Nicole, and there's everything else. And kind of the catchphrase in Kant's philosophy for everything else is the thing in itself, the essences, the external universe, that which is outside of you. The phenomenal world is that which is inside of you. Kant wants to put it all at the phenomenal level. All right, Hegel denies Kant's idea of an unknowable, objective reality. That's what he's denying. So write that down, then think about it. He's denying an unknowable, objective reality called in Kant the noumenal. He denies it. In a sense, Hegel says, what's the good of that? You know, what philosophical good is it to say, oh, everybody, this is where we are. Here's a big wall. And there's something over here, but we have no idea whether it's there. We don't even know if it's there. But that's really important. Well, wait a minute, Kant. You build this big wall, no way to get through the wall, and you tell me something over here is really important, but we can do nothing about it. He wants us to presuppose by faith all of these realities over here so we can make sense out of life over here. Hegel says, well, what? You know, you're wanting me to invent an unknowable, unreal world and then make it my guiding light? Come on. Let's see. So Hegel denies that. Hegel says this whole notion of a great objective reality, the noumenal reality that is essential to make sense out of life, etc., it's got to go. So what's Hegel's solution? This is what he does. It's almost like a step beyond Kant. His solution is to make all reality, in some sense, subjective. He makes all reality subjective. So rather than having this subject-object, in a sense, the object comes over and joins the subject in a dialectical relationship. Let me put it this way. For point one, the image you should have in your mind is this. Here's Kant's noumenal, here's Kant's phenomenal, and what Hegel wants to do is take this noumenal, which is unknowable, unreachable, unthinkable, and he wants to pull it down and make it part of this whole phenomenal order. So he denies the noumenal, he denies the thing in itself, all of this goes, and he combines it all down here at the phenomenal level, meaning, in a sense, at the subjective level. Okay? Ponder that for a moment. Comments, questions about that? We move on to point two, Hegel versus Kant. Kind of get this? So far so good? Point two. Hegel denies Kant's categories. Now this is almost the opposite. This is where it gets a little confusing, so just kind of, hang on. Kant makes the categories. Those four classes of categories and all the, the 12. Kant makes all of those subjective. Those are all part of how the meat grinder operates, right? Hegel denies that. Hegel he makes the categories, whatever they are, part of a kind of objective order playing out at the phenomenal level. So the categories are there, but they're there in a kind of objective expression of the way this phenomenal life is playing out. So the categories are not purely subjective anymore. And hang on just a second, Jordan, while I finish this thought, and I'll take questions. And the way he does this is that he makes your mind, in a sense, part of that objective order at the phenomenal level. This is Hegel moving toward pantheism. Hegel is kind of a pantheist. And so he's in a sense making the categories in your mind part of an objective mind reality at the phenomenal level. I know this sounds a little obtuse, but just hang on. Hopefully we can start coming up for air eventually. Jordan.
But if all Hegel said that all reality is subject.
Yes.
But how is it that all reality is subjective and yet this one thing is objective?
Okay, that's a wonderful question. and it is right at the kind of the mystery here. So let me try to. What Kant gave us was a sharp distinction between your subjective experience and some sort of objective order, the noumenal. Hegel wants to get rid of that. He wants to make everything subjective. How can I say this? But he wants to make your subjective reality part of an objective reality. He wants to have them both together here, so there's a kind of tension between them. But he doesn't want it to be out there where you can't know it. He wants it to be here, where it is, in fact, in a sense, part of you. Part of your mind, Jordan, is its connection to an objective order that includes my mind. So we're sort of sharing together in a kind of community of minds this phenomenal order. And it ceases to be unknowable. It's something now that I can somehow think about and describe and understand. You want to follow up another question? I'm not sure that's really a great helpful answer, but a correct answer. But if you want to ask a clarifying question, help me out here. Ask a question. You know?
Well, I'm so confused. I mean, if he's saying that I want to make all realities, he wants to make all reality subjective.
Yes.
But he wants all of our minds to be objective?
He wants, there's a sense in which your mind is part of an objective order. I don't know how else to put it. Your mind is not purely subjective anymore. Your mind is subjective to you, and yet it is also sharing, in a sense, something that is part of an objective order. This is leading to, maybe this will help, this is leading to something he calls the absolute ego. That your little ego is part of a much greater ego, which is really what he calls God. And your mind is in it, and my mind is in it. We're all sort of in it together, and so there's a sort of union of our minds in this greater mind, which he calls the absolute reason, or something like that.
Would we equate our minds to God?
Your mind, in some sense, is a little part of God. He is a pantheist. You've got to get your hands on that to understand Hegel. He's a pantheist of sorts. So your mind and my mind are all parts of this kind of greater mind. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Well, this is sort of two questions. First one, so is it kind of like a Neoplatonist idea with the nous?
Yeah. That's right. In fact, Hegel is occasionally bitten compared to Plotinus, so yeah, that's a good connection.
My second question is, I may be misremembering Kant, but didn't the mind and the meat grinder kind of make his reality? So if he has this objective notion in his mind, how can there be subjective reality? Does that make sense?
For Hegel?
For Hegel.
Yeah, he's still, he is aware that you have a sense of yourself as an individual person, So that's the subjective part. But he wants to say your mind is also connected to a broader, as it were, community of minds. That wouldn't be his term, but that's the idea. And we all share together in this great absolute mind. So we're a little piece of it.
Does he still believe we have 12 categories, or does he deny them all?
The categories as such, as Hegel breaks them out, as Kant breaks them out, are not so important. He thinks we share together something in common, which is the stuff of reason. And whether it's the 12th category, he may do that. I'm not sure, actually, to be honest with you. But he doesn't want this purely subjective categories. He wants it to be something we share. We all have these categories together in some greater mental reality. Let me push through these. The third one, he denies, and this kind of gets back to Jordan's question, he denies ego in an individual sense, He denies that there is this individual ego that each of us have. He says there is only a cosmic ego, or what he calls a world soul, or mind with a capital M, which he also calls the absolute spirit, or reason. I'm going to call it absolute spirit because that's a very common way to refer to. So remember, Kant put up here thing in itself. I'll just write thing in itself. He put up here the ego or the self. And again, what Hegel is denying is that that ego is there in the sense that Kant meant it. He sees the ego down here. But the ego has reality because it's part of this greater ego, this absolute ego. And we all share, in a sense, a little part of that great absolute ego, or God. We all have a little of this sort of God in us. God is almost indistinguishable from you. But we can't equate you with God because God is also in Sydney, and God is in Spencer, and God is in Stephen, and it takes all of us together, and all of those egos in the whole world taken together become this sort of absolute ego, which is his notion of God. I know this seems awfully obtuse, but I want to plead with you to try to get this, because it has shaped your world so profoundly. It's almost incalculable how deeply this has shaped, especially the 19th century. We still are kind of living in the effects of this. So kind of work with me here a little bit. Kristen.
I could see where Kant has influenced, I could see a specific example, but what are things today that reflect Hegel?
Hegel is the reason that liberal Christian theology happened. Hegel is the reason that there was ever a Charles Darwin. Hegel's the reason that there was ever a Karl Marx. You see, in other words, these guys, Hegel in himself, you think, well, big deal, but the effect he had as a practical matter on subsequent thinkers is almost, beyond calculation. So that's why. But you really don't even get Marx unless you get Hegel. Certainly don't get Darwin unless you get Hegel. People think Darwin's a biologist. No, he's a philosopher. And he's a philosopher who's giving us his philosophy in the trappings or in the clothing of biology. So they he's a biologer. No, not biologer. No, he's a biologist. No, he's a philosopher. Many other ways. So that's why he's important. But you look at him in himself, and it seems a little bit obtuse. I agree with that.
So does Hegel deny an absolute ego, or
He affirms it.
he affirms an absolute?
Yeah.
So is the ego the same thing as spirit?
His names are, these are all the same thing: absolute spirit, absolute ego, reason with a capital R, mind with a God with a capital G. They're all the same thing.
He denies it.
He affirms it.
He affirms it.
Yeah. Okay. Right? He denies this, he affirms that. Maybe I should make that clear. See, he's denying this. Maybe I should have said it this way. In terms of Kant, he's denying this ego upstairs. So I realize my list is probably not helping you much, but so he denies this. I'll put a little tilde here. Denies. This one he affirms, but it's his answer to Kant's idea of ego, which is your individual ego. He replaces with absolute ego. Okay. Thank you. Good question. Probably 90% of the people in this room were puzzling over the same little thing. So I'm very sorry for misleading you there. Hope that helps. Yes?
It could be a dumb question, but
No, this ought to be good. I love dumb questions.
does his idea of the collective ego and the collective absolute spirit, is that what influences morality? So saying that we shouldn't, like, I shouldn't kill somebody because they're part of the collective ego and don't want to harm anybody else in that?
Yes, although it's not quite so simple as that, and that's not a dumb question. It's a very good question. It's just that his answer would be a little bit more convoluted than you might think, but it's certainly pointing in the right direction. But you have to always keep in mind his dialectic, and that's where it becomes a little more complicated. We don't have simple rules. Do not kill. For Hegel, killing is in dialectical relationship to not killing, and in a sense the truth is contained in both. Oh, Krista, Hegel has given us relativism. See, relativism starts with Hegel for reasons we haven't talked about yet. So that's why he's pertinent, even though it's difficult. All right, fourth, Hegel denies, boy, I realize I really did mess you up here. For purposes of your notes, keep everything, but realize what I should have written here to make this a little bit more consistent. He's denying ego in the sense of Kant's individual, private ego. He's replacing it with absolute ego. It never helps when a complicated philosophy is made more complicated. And then finally, he denies in Kant's notion. I didn't use this term with Kant, so now I have to go back and explain the point of this. Kant's notion of antinomies. What does the word antinomy mean? Anybody know that word? Sydney? The word antinomy? What the word is? Trevor? Antinomy? Sydney, you know this word? No? Okay. Josiah? My last best hope? Antinomy? Antinomy? Go ahead, take a shot. Worst that can happen is you're wrong. And I mercilessly ridicule you, but otherwise, no problem.
Doesn't have anything to do with
Okay, well, the same root here. Okay, good. This is a word you should know. This is a word that gets bounced around, you know, in college classrooms, so it's not that obscure a word. Antinomos, antinomy, simply means a contradiction or an apparent contradiction, literally a violation of law. So an antinomy is something that doesn't seem to be obeying the rules. And it means fundamentally the notion of something being contradictory or self-contradictory or paradoxical, an antinomy. Okay. All right. In Kant, go back to Kant, he says the noumenal has antinomy. That's his word. He says the rules of logic don't apply at the noumenal level. You can't reason from the finite to the infinite. That's why the arguments for God's existence don't work, according to Kant. Because reason can't get you there. This is the place of contradiction. This is the place of antinomy. This is the place of irrationality. Reason only applies at the phenomenal level. Critique of pure reason says you can't apply it up here at the noumenal level. So that's Kant. Okay. Hegel denies that. Hegel denies this notion in Kant of antinomies at the noumenal level. Kant says the antinomies cannot be resolved. Hegel says they resolve in synthesis. Kant, the noumenal is filled with antinomies. Hegel brings the noumenal downstairs, plugs it in, and makes it part of the phenomenal order. Then says, as we observe these antinomies at the phenomenal level, we see the contradictions for sure. We see the collision, the conflict, the dialectic. But as we observe, we see that those things inevitably resolve. The thesis and the antithesis collide and resolve, and they resolve in some new synthesis. So rather than allowing antinomies, he denies them, saying the antinomies disappear in progress. Progress resolves those problems. That's why he's so concerned about history. History is where you see those antinomies. Yeah.
Does that also have something to do with revelation? Is that how they resolve themselves?
Yes, that's right. The synthesis is revelatory. We see God in the synthesis. So just to, here we are. We're living in a certain situation, and somebody comes along with a great idea. We'll call the idea A. Life is like this, and it's A. Parmenides. Whatever is. Some great affirmation of something. Somebody else comes along and says, no, it's non-A. That's the way it is. Antinomy. Heraclitus colliding with Parmenides. It appears to be an irreconcilable conflict. No solution. Hegel says, no, there is a solution. These two collide and somehow produce a great synthesis. Now, the critical thing to realize is that for Hegel, it's not that one was right and one was wrong. There's a deep sense in which both were right. But we never saw how they were right until we saw the synthesis. That's relativism. When A and its contradiction can both be true, you're in a relativistic world. In a world where there are no absolutes, where everything is fundamentally true. That was a novelty at the time Hegel said it. A world where it's taken for granted that there are no absolutes, and whatever you want to believe is true, at least in some sense. You follow me? So this is, it's a wonderful new epistemology. Everything is true. It's wonderful. Yes. Gordon.
But, I mean, how can he, that's completely denying the law of logic.
It is. He does deny the laws of logic.
How can he, if you were to come up to Hegel and say, you're denying the laws of logic right there, how would he respond to that?
He is saying that the laws of logic are limited, and that he's giving you a greater logic, a transcending logic, a logic that rises above these contradictions to something greater. That God is greater than these little rules of logic that you think should apply. The world is bigger than your little simple Aristotelian logic that you think proves, the Christian faith and other silly things. He thinks it's bigger than that. He thinks he's given us now a wonderful new universe in which we can see all the truth in all these various things. Yes, Steve?
So
Hegel appreciates what Kant is trying to do by trying to synthesize empiricism and rationalism. Even though he disagreed, he wasn't hostile to the Kant's ideas, was he?
He is, if you think about it, there, without Kant there could not have been a Hegel. He certainly understood what Kant was trying to do. He thinks he's doing everything that Kant accomplished and more. He feels like he's building on Kant's achievements. He appreciates Kant and believes Kant has done a great service, but Kant left some unfinished business. He left us with an order of reality that is fundamentally important and can't be known. Hegel says, what's up with that? How can an order of reality that is fundamentally important and cannot be known be very useful? I want to get that fundamental reality down where we can know it, but we're going to know it in history. We're going to know it in the progress of history, or in Hegel's favorite term, evolution. That's his term. We see God in the progress of collision, struggle, conflict, evolution. That's what evolution is. It's progress through conflict. Darwin's book was entitled what? What's the full title of Darwin's book? Somebody's got to know it. It's the full title of Darwin's book. Go ahead, Josiah, take your best shot. The Origin of the Species, that's what everyone knows. What's the full title? Stephen? Somebody's got to know it.
Stephen, your thesis is on this.
I don't know the other half.
Do you know it, Jacob? Okay, I want you all to know it. It just illustrates the point. We'll deal with Darwin separately. The Origin of the Species by means of natural selection is the first part, comma, or the preservation of favored races in the what? Struggle for life. Note the word struggle. Yeah. First catch the point. Struggle. Dialectic. Conflict. Evolution. Darwin is simply a Hegelian biologist. More Hegelian than biologist, in my humble opinion. All right, here it is once again. The origin of the species by means of natural selection. That's the easy part. Usually here. Comma. Or the preservation of favored races. It's also a racist book. I mean, get that. Hitler liked Darwin for a reason. He believed he was part of a favored race, as Darwin had taught him, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Why did Hitler feel free to go start attacking the rest of Europe? In a struggle that we call Second World War? Because he was the favored race. And Darwin taught him, that's what you do. And that out of this struggle would come a great new civilization. Oh, we'd have to eliminate a few million Jews and other undesirables, but in the greater scheme of things, we're realizing a Hegelian utopia. Hitler was a Hegelian. That's another reason that he's influenced, subsequent history. Okay, go ahead. The question over here, was that? No? I thought I saw a sign of life. A beating heart. No, was that you? I always get excited when I see anybody in the room breathing. There's something other than dead bodies in here. All right. Now, there's a lot more to say about Hegel, but I'm hoping at least you're kind of seeing, in general terms, kind of what's going on. We've got 2 minutes left. That's not quite enough time to launch any new discussion. Somebody ask a question. Please just ask a question to keep me going here for the last 2 minutes. Josiah, please.
My question is, did Hegel realize that by saying that you progress through synthesis ideas that his idea itself, the synthesis, might just be a synthesis.
Josiah, that is a stroke of genius on your part. The first time I ever heard anyone make that comment was a PhD in philosophy who was lecturing rather sympathetically on Hegel, not a Christian, but noting kind of almost by embarrassment that, now the problem that Hegel doesn't really address is that if he's true, then Hegel himself turns out to just be an A, to which a non-A's got to come along, and Hegel just becomes one more bump in the road, you know. He thinks he's the great, final, definitive, but his own philosophy refutes the very thing he thinks of himself. So congratulations, Josiah. That was, nicely done. Let's hold on. We got 30 seconds. Ben, you got the last word.
Do you have any historical examples?
Much of his writing is filled with what he views to be historical examples. Yeah, definitely.